Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This is another episode of Everything You Need to Know about Product Marketing Interviews. My name is Kenton Kvescu. I'm the founder and CEO of Rocketblocks, which is an online platform that helps candidates prepare for interviews, of course, including product marketing. And today we have the honor of having Hila Segal from Clari joining us. She's the VP of Product Marketing there, and it is a company that helps other companies, a B2B company, run their revenue process with confidence, obviously something that's super important. So I'm going to let Hila say a few words about her role, and then we're going to jump into questions.
Yeah. Hey, thank you for having me. Really excited to be here. So I run product marketing here at Clari. We're fortunate to work with a lot of B2B companies, helping their revenue teams, anywhere from their CEO and CFOs, CROs, frontline managers, marketing, customer success, all the way to the individual rep. See where they have risk, where they have opportunity in their pipeline, what deals are at risk, how they can be more predictable with their revenue. Couldn't be more important today than ever before. And I run product marketing here. I have the fortunate of working with a group of really talented product marketers to create really compelling, differentiated product messaging, positioning of the company, launch new product, enable our sales team, drive competitive readiness. So we're responsible for all of that. Just a little bit about myself. I've been in B2B my entire career and sort of lucky enough to really stumble upon product marketing early in my career and really focused in that. A big passion to technology and how that can be applied to solve business problems for companies, and have always sort of been fascinated by how features and functions can really be turned into tremendous business value, and that's been my focus. And I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, it's great to have you. That what your company provides is super important these days. And there are multiple companies I've been in the past where we would have really benefited from having a product like that in place. And so let's jump in. We're going to talk about everything you need to know about product marketing interviews today. And this is great to have you here because I know that you have sort of built up the entire sort of product marketing function. So it's going to be really interesting to hear your take on these questions. And what I wanted to start with is, of course, just like as you think about product marketing interviews, what are your favorite questions to ask product marketing candidates, and why do you think those ones are particularly important?
One thing that I really like to start interviews with every PMM candidate, honestly, it doesn't matter if it's more of a junior role or a senior role. I like to understand how they define the role of product marketing and why they want to do the job, right? And I care about not just the answer itself, but how they deliver it. Are they giving me sort of a textbook answer of product marketing is the Venn diagram of sales and product and customers, or are they telling me a story, right, about their experiences, a project that they have recently run that really significantly impacted the business, a day in the life of how they run their business? You can get pretty creative in how you answer these questions. And product marketing is also defined very differently from one company to the other, is what I find. So that perspective is just really telling for me, and sort of where is the passion for what they do as product marketers, because a lot of how it's defined in companies has to do with the individuals that are doing the job. So I really like to start with that. I also like to hear about things like the riskiest decisions and what they've learned from that, or what's the last original idea that you've had, and was it a good one in retrospect? Think about it. What is one product marketing project that you're really proud of, and now that you look back at it, how could you have made it better, right? It's often those follow-up questions. How would you have improved it? What have you learned from it? That really provide the most interesting sort of information about the candidate, because it tells you how they learn, how they grow, how do they actually sort of think about their tasks and projects and work.
Got it. Interesting. And for the definition of the role of product marketing, is sort of answering it with a story or anecdote, is that the key? Or is it like what sets apart a really good answer to that question versus the sort of meh answer to that question?
Yeah, there's no right answer, right, of what is product marketing. So I'm more interested in, again, how do you decide to answer that question? How do you make me sort of excited about understanding your point of view? Again, as I said before, how do you bring storytelling, which is a really important skill from a product marketing perspective? How do you bring that into the fold, right? So it's the way that you answer, the examples that you share, right? And how do you bring it to life is what really matters.
Got it.
There really isn't one answer that I'm expecting, right?
So it's about the narrative and like the specifics they sort of use to capture your attention.
Yeah, and this is just generally my philosophy for interviews in general, right? This is not a test. It's really about how can you create that type of interaction with the person that you're talking to that get me super like excited and really sort of fascinated by your answers, right? And I usually start with that because it sort of sets the tone for the entire interview. So yeah, it's one of my favorites.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about sort of the flip side and not necessarily just on that question, but partly in that question. But what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see in product marketing interviews? And it could be when answering this type of question, but also just in general, like what if you're a candidate and you're maybe thinking about breaking into product marketing for the first time, or maybe you're a little more seasoned, but you're going into interviews. There's a lot of other good candidates out there. What do you want to make sure you avoid?
Yeah, and again, I touched a little bit upon this when I answered the first question, but the one thing that I really like to double down in PMM interviews, and it's probably right for any type of interview, but I like to sort of think about it as real life examples. Even if you're asked you're not asked specifically for that, pepper in those little stories, these vignettes that sort of talk about these projects that you've worked on. If you are asked about how do you learn about a new product or a new market, then share an example of how you've done that. When was the last thing that you've learned something new and how did you go about doing this? So add details about where were some of the challenges that you've had? How did you solve them? Who did you work with? What would you have done differently to support this in retrospect as you look back at this? Don't be afraid, I think, to share mistakes, right? And things that really didn't go as well, because this will show that you have a growth mindset, right? And you're learning from your mistakes and you're constantly looking to improve and to grow. So I think the biggest mistake sometimes is just, again, keeping it a little too theoretical and sort of too academic, right? Where what you really want, I mean, what is the purpose of an interview if it's not really to get to know the person, right? So make sure that you're really including these stories and you have a narrative right behind those stories that you practice already, but make it sort of real. And as many examples as you share, it's going to really give the person that is interviewing you a good sense of what this might look like in real life if you're in the job.
Yeah, so details, examples are sort of the key, like bring it to life with that type of stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look back at your work, and that's part of where I would say is as you're practicing or as you're preparing for this, make a list of these great things that you've done. And it doesn't have to be, a 6 months project that you've worked on. It can be also smaller things, but make a list of things that you're really proud of, things that you've learned a ton from, right? Things that might have gone great or not great, things that you've done for the first time, right? And what you've learned from. And everyone has a ton of these things to share. It's just, refresh your memory, make sure you have them handy and make sure that you're including them in your answers.
Yeah, that's very similar to some advice that I often give out, which is like make that list of like the 3 to 5 career highlight stories. And then as you get these questions that come up, think about how you can sort of reframe those stories or tell the part of them that's really relevant, with that detail for whatever question the interviewer has brought up. So that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah,
Details matter.
Yeah, details matter. And again, I think you're right on the 3 key highlights of your career, but as I said, it doesn't have to be only those 3 big things, right? Make sure you have a few other things you can share, more smaller stories. It just makes it a lot more interesting.
Awesome. How about, as you think about an interview process for a product marketer, maybe it's phone screen, there's a panel, maybe there's a presentation. Every company sort of has their own twist on it. But ultimately, I think each company is trying to sort of suss out, like, does he or she have some set of skills that we're looking for that we think are going to make them successful on the job? And when you think about that for you, what are those key skills that you're looking for in a product marketing hire?
Yeah, one thing for product marketers, and it doesn't really matter if you're a people's manager or if you're more junior PMM, but leadership is really important because as a product marketer, you're going to be leading people that are not directly reporting to you, right? I think it's probably arguably one of the most important skills for a PMM because you're going to be working cross-functionally on different projects, whether it's a product launch, whether it's something related to churn strategy and sort of churn mitigation, whether it's about enabling the team on a new go-to-market motion, right? all of this requires the ability to work with people and lead them through these projects, even though you're not really managing them directly.
Yeah.
And leadership is really about sort of inspiring these folks and making sure that they understand, why are we doing this, and what are going to be the results of this, and what are we measuring against, and why is this important for me to drop everything and participate in this project now where I have a lot of other things going on, right, as part of my job. If you're pulling in people from product, from customer success, from sales, from the extended team in marketing. So that's just a really important skill that is, I think, is a must for every PMM.
The influencing without formal authority in most cases.
Exactly. And, again, it certainly is important when you're hiring for a team lead, right? And someone who needs to do that, but really for anyone. I also hire for self-awareness, curiosity, creativity. Those are skills that I think really important, especially for a PMM, right? Who's oftentimes going to be bringing new products to market or designing new motions, being able to be curious and asking good questions and really pressure testing some assumptions is going to be important. And then creativity is just at the core, again, of what we're doing, because there's just so many different ways that you can go about doing something, and being able to sort of constantly find new ways to do things that drive audience sort of interest and participation, but also creates excitement internally. Like, we have to remember that as PMMs, we have to get people excited internally as we have to get people excited externally, right? So that really matters. And then from a cultural perspective, this is something that I really focus on, mainly because at Clari, the culture is so fundamental, right, to everything that we do. So I do look for candidates that sort of embody our values, right? But at the same time, I'm looking for candidates that can add perspective and diversity for the team, right? So it's not just a cultural fit, but I would say a cultural add, right, where they can bring in new ideas and sort of new perspectives. And those are some of the things that I'm looking for. Not all of them, by the way, are easy to sort of find and necessarily sort of discover in an interview. But that's why we have, as you said, sort of a panel of folks that usually meet our candidates, and we make sure that there's enough point of views coming from different people on the team. And we also like to have some sort of a delivery, right, that comes from the candidates to get a sense of sort of how they think, how they present, how they sort of deal with a problem that
Got
is.
it. And when you say delivery, I think I know what you're saying, but can you just clarify for the audience, what would a delivery in an interview context mean?
Well, there's a few things. Generally in an interview, when we're one-on-one in an interview, delivery to me is how articulate you are and how are you able to sort of really be crisp and clear with your answers, make sure that you're actually answering the questions, not going too, giving too lengthy answers that it's sort of like we forget where we started, right? Yeah. But there's also delivery as it relates to, and in some cases, we'll do a presentation that the candidate will get some sort of a prompt, and based on that, we would want that candidate to build a short presentation to be delivered to the team. And delivery there is really about how they think and how they organize their thoughts, but also how they command a room, right, with a group of people. How do they connect with their audience? How do they answer questions? Obviously, for a product marketer, the ability to stand in front of an audience is also really important, again, internal or external. Yeah. That gives us a sense, right, of that delivery.
Got it. And like the type of prompt that a candidate might get for the second type of delivery, like the presentation, might be something like, hey, how would you think about doing GTM for this type of product? Or what's an example of like the types of prompts that would lead to the presentations?
Yeah, I mean, it can be anything from, typically it will be some sort of a scenario. Okay. For example, you're about to launch product X. Here's some basic messaging information about this product. Mm-hmm. Come share with us what would be your launch plan. Right? Yeah. How would you think about launching this product? Okay. So we do take into the account that the candidate doesn't know the business as any one of us would, right? So we're not necessarily looking for accuracy on everything, but it's more about, again, just like, how do they think about that? How would they approach it? How do they organize their content, right?
Yeah, how do they structure things?
Yeah, how do they present it? So that's so telling, right? As you can imagine, for how candidates handle that, and gives us a great kind of insight into, great things that we might have not picked up on the sort of general interview.
Yeah, awesome. What about if we think about, let's say you're an aspiring product marketer, you want to break into this career path for the first time, and there's a lot of people in this bucket. What tips do you have for someone above and beyond the other things we've been talking about? Like if you're trying to break in for the first time, what should you be thinking about or focusing on specifically?
Yeah, in general, do you talk about just generally how you prepare and approach an interview like this, or?
Yeah, and yeah, it could be general, but also like if you're new to this, it's the first time, like what should you be thinking about?
Yeah, I do think that you have to just prepare and over prepare, right, for this, especially if you're new and aspiring to go into this role. Think about what are you bringing to the role that, might not check the box on everything that is required, right? Especially if you're new to this.
First time, yeah.
But why would you be a good fit for this role? What have you done, or what have you learned, or what skills do you have, or where is your passion? How fast you learn? How can you sort of show that to kind of have that conversation? I do think that there's a lot of opportunities, right, for people coming into this. And you might be coming from a technical background, right? And you have been, an engineer or a product manager, or, an SC, where you're wanting to make the move into product marketing, and you have a lot of experience in building demos and narratives and scripts for that. And you've worked with customers, right? So there's different types of ways you can come into this, but it will be helpful just to have a narrative, right, that explains why. And also, why are you making this move? Like, why do you want to make this move from one place to the other? That's always very interesting, right? And telling. And
Like why product marketing and why now type thing. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I'd say is that, again, I do think that there's a lot of opportunity just because there's just a ton of hiring, and there's no shortage for need for product marketers, right? In any size company, whether it's smaller companies that are quickly realizing that they really need to start early with product marketers, as it sets the foundation for the entire sort of marketing strategy, even in early stage companies, and certainly in sort of more advanced companies. So the opportunity is there. Just have to really sort of make the person really understand, why is it worth taking a risk on someone who hasn't done this before, and why is it you?
Got it. And then one last question. So just thinking about any candidate in general coming into this process, like you said, there's a lot of demand. I think there's also these days a lot of competition for these roles. Like people know that it's an engaging role, it's a challenging role, compensation's usually pretty good. How do you set yourself apart?
Yeah. So I did talk about sort of examples in interviews, actual results, right? How successful were you in if you've done a product launch, if you've introduced new messaging frameworks, if you've launched a new enablement program, like really explain and share those nuggets. I'm also a big fan of the post-interview follow-up, and I do think that's a great opportunity for candidates to stand out. Not everyone really takes advantage of that.
Yeah, tell me more about like what specifically can you do in that post-interview opportunity to make it a standout thing versus like, oh, I got a thank you note from so-and-so.
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't mean like the templatized thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
But think about a more of a thoughtful sort of follow-up. This will sort of keep you top of mind as a candidate. Share an article that is related to a topic that was discussed on the call. If you had an idea that was inspired by, some of the topics that were discussed and some of the challenges that team is facing, why are you excited about this? What kind of additional maybe examples you can share? So this is a great sort of way to follow up, right? And do it with everyone that you've met with. Unfortunately, not a lot of people are doing this, not even just a basic thank you note, but certainly if you want to stand out, just continue the dialogue, right? With the people that have met with you. And that will sort of show them that you're very excited, right? And committed to this process, but also give them a sense again of how you're thinking and what kind of value you can potentially bring when you're in the role, right?
Yeah.
I also think that there is For PMMs, sharing work samples is really helpful, right? Because you want to know, how does that person write? So today there's just a lot of ways where you can create a representation of your work samples through different tools and different types of landing pages that you can create that really makes it easy for the team to get a sense of what kind of work you've done. So it's not a must, right? But I think that people who do that definitely sort of, again, stand out.
Yep.
Rather than send an email or a Google Doc with a bunch of links, right? So however you choose to do follow-ups, I do think that the follow-up is key. Think about it. You're trying to land a deal here, right? So follow-up and then boom, continue to be multi-threaded, right? You've met multiple people from that team, not just your hiring manager. So do that extra step. And I think that will be a great way to stand out.
Yeah, I love the point about using the follow-up specifically to add some more value. Like, hey, just want to say thank you for taking the time to interview. And by the way, I was thinking about that point you brought up. The team is wrestling with X, and I saw this link or this article or this piece of analysis might be helpful. I just wanted to like pass it along, like that type of stuff. I have seen candidates do that occasionally, and it does. I just agree it's an interesting way to demonstrate a lot of things all at once. Like that you were really listening, that you found some relevant information for them based off a problem they're having, like all good signals that if you're the interviewer, the hiring manager, you're like, oh yeah, like this person's already adding value.
Yeah, you know, it does go back to sort of how you prep for the interview, right? And really trying to understand the business of this company and have some sort of a point of view, right? So much information out there. And in a way, maybe it's a lot, right? And too much. But if you're talking to a public company, for example, look at their 10K, find out like what's really important for them. What are they trying to achieve, this year, in the next 2 years? This will be so impressive, right? For someone, as your hiring manager, that you've actually took the time to think about this.
Yeah.
Look at what the executives are talking about, right? What are they tweeting about? So beyond just looking at the website or the products do one extra level of sort of investigation. And again, that will set you apart, because if you have a point of view of the business and you're more thoughtful in the questions that you ask and also sort of how you lead the conversation through that's going to be a great way to stand out too.
Yeah. Completely agree. And there's no excuse. Like there's so much information out there. Like the CEOs are doing podcasts. There's like interviews with him or her on YouTube, the tweets, like all the informal stuff that you mentioned, I think is also like, there's a lot of good nuggets in there about how people communicate, what they talk about. Like the 10K, I think is like the sort of canonical starting point for like going deep, because it's like formally what the company is saying. And then legally, they have to disclose certain things for like shareholders that are important and whatnot. So it's like a great starting point. But then like, informally, like the tweets that you mentioned, that's where it's like you see sort of what's on the CEO's, his or her mind. And I think that type of stuff is invaluable. And I agree.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I feel like this was a great place to end.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking time, sharing your perspective with us, and giving everyone that's listening, hopefully, a bunch of great insights into how to succeed in product marketing interviews.
Well, thanks for having me. And for all of you PMMs out there that are interviewing, so much opportunity out there for everyone to land in a good place. So good luck to everyone, and really excited to share some of my learnings. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks for joining.
This podcast is produced by ShareBird, the peer mentoring platform for product marketers. It is the place to discover on-demand resources to help you with your product marketing. To view past episodes, go to sharebird.com. And if you're preparing for product marketing interviews, check out Rocketblock's Product Marketing Interview Prep Tools, the best place to practice PMM interview skills and get live coaching to ace your PMM interviews. Visit us at rocketblocks.me.